I don't feel sorry for the notion that there's awful Daddy Warbucks owners running around stockpiling this butter mountain of footballers. It must be dreadful to manage. Well, what's dreadful to manage is having very little talent. This is One-to-One with Simon Jordan. Liking and subscribing is a must. Keep leaving those questions in the comment section below, equal as important. But let's get on with this week's show. Christopher, how alarmed should one be with a globalised world and people with huge wealth wanting to buy arguably the most iconic football club in the world? I don't know if alarmed is the right context. That ship has sailed. We've opened the door to huge wealth wanting to buy our football clubs. And it's no surprise to me. The alternate argument is Qatari money is going to land. Which league would we want it to land in? Would we be happier at landing in La Liga or Serie A or La Ligue, as it already has done with PSG? Look, the idea that football clubs are in play now for huge economic reasons and huge influencing reasons is just a simple fact. And the ship has sailed about state ownership. The preposterous, ridiculous assertion that assurances to the Premier League from the PIF fund, which is a sovereign wealth fund whose sole focus in life is to make money for Mohammed bin Salman and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, details that ultimately you're going to get other huge desires from parts of the world that want their own football clubs for varying reasons, and some of it not the greatest, are going to find themselves in the Premier League. So with that in mind, I'm not alarmed. I'm not overly troubled by it. So of course you're going to have the clamouring for human rights organisations to look at the ownership model. But again, that ship has sailed. I think the bulk of Manchester United fans that want their club back are going to be in favour, like most football fans are, of those that come into the room with the most money. What I'd like to see is the governance for sport in place so that the ideals behind the reduction of what you can spend to 90% of the available turnover and then 70% by 2025 will make sure that there's some form of control over who gets what and why. But the idea that I should be overly concerned by the Qataris, well, of course I am to some extent, because every British asset we seem to want to have in this country I've ever bought up is being ever built up and brought up out of the very fabric of this country has been sold. But I'm a realist, and I look at the Qatari bid, if it's going to be successful. I look at the process. I look at the Jim Radcliffes of the world and the American bankers that may also be in, and I don't know which one of them I would. It's like saying, for me as a football purist, which one of these would I like to French kiss the least, my sister or my mother? So I'm kind of in the camp that I accept it. I understand the reality of globalization. I understand the challenges around a Qatari or Middle Eastern bid, but that ship has sailed with an ownership takeover of Newcastle. So it comes down to how much use that is to Manchester United, what it means to everybody else. But it will put the fear of God into FSG. It'll put the fear of God into Arsenal. It'll keep the Man City ownership focused on their continued investment programs. But I just think it's a reality, and I think there's a school of thought, and I'm not sure I'm in it, but I'm going to patronise it to some extent, that where would you rather have this powerhouse of a money landing in other people's leagues, developing it, or perhaps in the Premier League? You're asking the wrong person about sorrow for football managers, because they're big boys, they take on great responsibility, they leave other environments and take the resources from those other environments and take them to their other football clubs they're going to when it suits them. So I don't feel sorry for Potter. I don't feel sorry for the notion that there's awful Daddy Warbucks owners running around stockpiling this butter mountain of footballers. It must be dreadful to manage. Well, what's dreadful to manage is having very little talent in a football team, having very little option. Those are difficult things to manage. Graham Potter's got to get his big boy pants on and get this team playing. And I don't expect the narrative to change too much at Chelsea. I mean, obviously it's a pretty poor result against Southampton. And you have to give immense credit to the Southampton team and the Southampton interim manager, who cuts an interesting swathe, by the way, with the dynamics of how he thinks he should be getting that job. But I don't feel sympathy for Potter. He's got to get himself together. And they've got to give him some time, because it is a vast departure from managing Brighton, from stepping out of Ostersund's into Swansea, and from Swansea into Brighton are all incremental steps. This is a huge step up to Chelsea with a huge level of expectation, and he would have known that, and they have to give him time. They have an ownership model that's changed, a direction of thinking that's changed at Chelsea, an accumulation of players that need to be brought into the fold and adapted to a new style of ownership and a new style of management and a new style of thinking behind the contracts that these players are being put on. So they must give Potter some time. He must be given enough rope to either run with, or the alternative in football terms. But no, I don't feel sorry for him. He's got to get this team functioning. There's enough in that squad. The argument will be, why haven't they bought a centre forward? And there must be a reason. There's a centre forward arriving in the summer, so I'm led to believe. And of course, the Lukaku problem creates a problem on balance sheet terms for them, or what they're going to do with him. But there's enough in that team to be scoring goals, and enough about that team to be doing better than they currently are. So Potter will have to get his head in gear. Will have to push back against the building pressure. I thought he did well last week when he talked about how he will be, and how this assertion being made by certain pundits that he needs to be more demonstrative and more angry when things aren't going his way and penalties weren't given. He's got to do it his way. So no, I don't feel any pity for him. If someone's getting paid between £7 and £10 million a year to be a football manager, I don't think pity is a word that you need to associate with them. What would I do with Mason Mount? I think he's a very decent player, and if you listen to some of the people that I spend time with, like Danny Murphy, that are very educated midfielders, and Graeme Souness, they think he's a very good player. But none of them, let's be clear, none of them are worth £200,000 a week. None of them are worth £300,000 a week. There's an argument to be said that most of them are not worth £50,000 a week, because when we get into context about what they actually do, then it's difficult to justify their salaries. And of course, when you put into perspective the advertising revenues in the world of football, then of course you can make the argument that they're all worth whatever they get. Mason Mount, I think, is one of those that's not going to make the cuts with Chelsea's new way of building and buying. And because he's on Chelsea's balance sheet as a zero cost because he's an academy player, I suspect he may well be one of those sold. Now, where he's sold to, I don't know. But if the dressing room is full of people that are earning as an average £200,000 a week, as preposterous as that is, then it's well within Mason Mount's right to be asking for that. And always, as the case, the players that are developed through youth systems always tend to take more time to catch up to the wages that the new players who haven't done anything for the club get brought in on. But again, it makes the case, where are Chelsea going and what do they want to do and what kind of structure are they putting in place? But I don't think Mason Mount is a £200,000 a week player. I think he's a very, very good player. But I think a lot of these players, again, I'm sort of like a turkey voting for Christmas against my own argument, are getting paid preposterous money, and so why wouldn't they ask for it? But I think Mason Mount will be sold by Chelsea, and it might just square its own circle. But the problem then is, who buys him at top money and who pays him top money? That I don't know. Oh, I think that's a very difficult argument to make. Are City a worse team with Erling Haaland in it? Worse than what? Worse than what they've been before? Well, at this moment in time, City aren't the same side, and I don't think that's just because of Erling Haaland. I think it's just a natural order of things. No one stays on top forever. You know, the Liverpool team of the 70s and 80s was so good, but like everything else, certain players leave, and the change in the team isn't always to maintain the same level or go up. Sometimes it regresses. They're still, in my view, the best team in the country. I think it's nip and tuck between those and Arsenal's remarkable win on the weekend gives them some more oxygen to breathe. I still think it will be City that win the Premier League, but I think it's going to be very nip and tuck on that basis. But Erling Haaland gives you something. When I watched the Arsenal game midweek, Arsenal were a very good side for the first half, but they never carried the impending threat that Man City always had, the imminent threat of Erling Haaland or Kevin De Bruyne. So I think it's difficult to argue that Man City are a worse side. I think they're slightly falling in between two stools of now having an option they didn't have before and acclimatising to how they want to play with that option. The fellas scored 25 goals. Man City are sitting second in the league, and in my view are going to win the league. So whilst they might not be that poetic beauty that Man City had, which is a complete and utter smooth domination of the ball, Haaland, to me, they may have taken slightly one step back to take the inevitable two steps forward. I think Man City will regain the pomp of dominance, tragically, for the Premier League, unless someone's going to do something remarkable. And I don't think they can argue. I don't think it should be argued that they're worse. I just think they're going for a slight change. And I don't like the characterisation of the question, are Man City worse with Erling Haaland? Because that would somehow make Erling Haaland complicit in making them worse, when ultimately he makes them a potent force in a slightly different way. Right, that's it for this week's edition of One to One with Simon Jordan. Don't forget to let me know your thoughts on the Manchester United takeover, Erling Haaland, does he make City worse or better, and the travails of Graham Potter. Keep liking and subscribing. Keep leaving the aforementioned questions in the comment section below. I shall look forward to seeing you next week.